Good evening. Thank you for joining us this evening for the Center for Fiction's 2022 Annual Awards Benefit and Auction. I'm Tracy Lester, the Executive Director. The Center for Fiction provides a diverse and vibrant home for readers and writers. We do this by uplifting fiction and storytelling in all its forms. We are here tonight because we are lovers of fiction, because we value the importance of this community, and because we believe in the power of storytelling. As we begin our program tonight, I would like to take a moment to thank a few people. I'd like to thank our benefit co-chairs, Errol McDonald and Clara Glazuska, Celia and Henry McGee, and Jelani Cobb. Please also join me in offering special thanks to our board chair, Errol McDonald, and to the dedicated members of the board benefit committee, Celia McGee, David Bruson, Nan Graham, Chi Caetano, Cal Morgan, and Jacqueline Woodson. I want to also extend enormous thanks to our exceptionally generous contributors, including Kenneth Chenault, Penguin Random House, Book of the Month, and David Bruson. And special thanks to the staff of the Center for Fiction who are here with us tonight and who make this work possible. They're back there. Last year when we gathered here at Cipriani, much of our programming was virtual and hybrid due to the COVID pandemic. Now the Center for Fiction is open 7 days per week and with robust in-person programming. We are thankful to be able to invite visitors into our building located at 15 Lafayette Avenue in Fort Greene, Brooklyn. To learn more about what we do at the Center for Fiction, I'm going to invite you to view the video that's following me that will tell you more about our programming, and I hope you enjoy it.
200 years ago, the Mercantile Library of New York opened its doors in a single upstairs room at 49 Fulton Street, containing just 700 books. Things have changed a bit since then. Something that hasn't changed, however, is our goal of offering our members a path to knowledge via fiction and their own imaginations.
A writer's job is to reach out and like from our heart to yours and say, yes, this is real and let's go on this journey.
By offering public events that engage diverse communities, fellowships that empower new voices, and educational programming to perk up all the senses of the next generation, we support the creation and enjoyment of fiction to assure a strong future for storytelling across boundaries of identity and experience. With our innovative public events programming, each year we present more than 150 authors and artists across genres and from around the globe for performances, series that draw important voices to enlighten and entertain, conversations on craft, and an exploration of fiction's singular power to show us who we are and who we imagine we could be.
Where you come from will become one of your greatest assets as a human being.
Look at everything.
Like, remember all of this, soak it in, and write. And when you write, you better write so every sentence sings.
I didn't laugh out loud, but I gleed at some of the hideous things you put up. I mean, I didn't laugh, but they were witty to me.
Winter in Ohio was especially rough if you had an appetite for color.
Our year-long Emerging Writers Fellowship program makes it possible for young writers of exceptional promise to pursue a literary career. Each year, 9 talented New York City-based early career writers are provided with a grant of $5,000, mentorship by an experienced editor, a physical space to write in our light-filled writer studio, workshops, and a range of opportunities to forge industry connections. In recent years, 17 fellows have published debut books that they've developed during their fellowship year, all of which came from connections made as a result of their fellowships.
Do you like books?
Yes, I love to read. I love books.
Kids read, kids write.
provides stimulating literary programming for children and young people from under-resourced New York City public schools, engaging more than 2,500 students in grade 3 through 12 annually. Our students participate in events with today's most talented children and young adult authors. They are given a copy of a new book free of charge, which they read with their classmates and write about in their own words. Then they have the opportunity to engage directly with the author, asking questions about the characters, the plot, and the art of storytelling and what it means to be a writer.
Creating interest and excitement for young people of all backgrounds who hunger to see their own lives reflected in print has never been more important. That's why we're honored to have a diversity of dynamic writers participate in KidsRead, KidsWrite, selected for the quality and relevance of their work and their ability to broaden worldviews and spark imaginations.
Find what you care about and trust that your stories matter.
To learn more about the Center for Fiction and all of its programming, visit centerforfiction.org.
Good evening. Thank you so much for coming out in spite of the inclemency out there. I would like to offer profound gratitude to all of the presenters and honorees tonight, to our 2022-2023 Emerging Writers Fellows who are in the house tonight, to our hardworking staff at the Center for Fiction, and also gratitude to the brilliant, ferociously accomplished novelist and activist Jennifer Egan, who will be our MC tonight. Now, out there at the cocktail party, somebody walked up to me and said, "This evening is a vibe." Now, I remain innocent of the meaning of that locution, no matter how many times I've heard it. But it was said with such passion and affirmation as to suggest a good thing. So I'm feeling a good thing tonight. And I've asked a special guest to dramatize that good thing. Performing tonight on the prepared piano is Spanish-born virtuoso, pianist, and composer Marta Sánchez. I'm not through yet, Marta. Introducing you. Marta has developed a global reputation since she emigrated from Spain to New York years ago. Soon after she arrived, in 2015, her album, Partenica, was chosen by the New York Times music critics as one of the top 10 albums of 2015 in any genre. In 2019, her album, El Rayo de Luz, was also chosen by the New York Times as one of the 10 top albums, but this time in the jazz category. Good people of Center for Fiction, Marta Sánchez.
Hello and welcome. I'm Jennifer Egan. Thank you. And it will be my honor and pleasure to guide us through this evening as we celebrate the power of art to transfix and transform and to enlarge our understanding of the humanity we share. Tonight, we will present the Center for Fiction's Medal for Editorial Excellence, its first novel prize, and we will honor Nobel laureate, playwright, poet, novelist, and political activist Wole Soyinka. We are here to champion storytelling as a primal and universal human act, an impulse deeper than anything that might separate or divide us. No matter who we are or what we believe, we share the need to tell stories. And like many people in this room, I have devoted a huge portion of my life to reading and writing fiction. The Center for Fiction is unique in the literary landscape for singling out fiction as a cultural force. That validation and focus become more crucial with every proliferation of digital distractions, many of which promise and even simulate what only fiction can actually deliver, the experience of being inside the mind of another human being. It's true. If we're looking at a picture, that is not happening. We are on the outside. But as we all know, powerful entities are in the business of making us look and keep looking. In the attention economy, deep and imaginative reading is an act of resistance. As a reader and writer, I am so grateful to the Center for Fiction for nurturing and rewarding our resistance, for insisting upon the value of fiction as an expression of our collective dream life, and thereby helping to keep our genre fierce, relevant, and vital.
These pages were written in the summer of 1989, 4 months after the fatwa. There was once in the country of Alif Bey a sad city, the saddest of cities, a city so ruinously sad that it had forgotten its name. It stood by a mournful sea full of glumfish, which were so miserable to eat that they made people belch with melancholy, even though the skies were blue. In the north of the sad city stood mighty factories in which, so I'm told, sadness was actually manufactured, packaged, and sent all over the world, which never seemed to get enough of it. Black smoke poured out of the chimneys of the sadness factories and hung over the city like bad news. And in the depths of the city, beyond an old zone of ruined buildings that looked like broken hearts, there lived a happy young fellow by the name of Haroun, the only child of the storyteller Rashid Khalifa, whose cheerfulness was famous throughout that unhappy metropolis, and whose never-ending stream of tall, short, and winding tales had earned him not one, but 2 nicknames. To his admirers, he was Rashid, the oceans of notions, as stuffed with cheery stories as the sea was full of glumfish. But to his jealous rivals, he was the Shah of Blah. To his wife, Soraya, Rashid was for many years as loving a husband as anyone could wish for, and during these years, Haroun grew up in a house in which, instead of misery and frowns, he had his father's ready laughter and his mother's sweet voice raised in song. Haroun went with his father wherever he could because the man was a magician. It couldn't be denied. He would climb on up onto some little makeshift stage in a dead-end alley packed with raggedy children and toothless old-timers, all squatting in the dust. And once he got going, even the city's many wandering cows would stop and cock their ears. And the monkeys would jabber approvingly from rooftops. And the parrots in the trees would imitate his voice. Where did all these stories come from? It seemed that all Rushdie had to do was to part his lips in a plump red smile, and out would pop some brand new saga, complete with sorcery, love interests, princesses, wicked uncles, fat aunts, mustachioed gangsters in yellow check pants, fantastic locations, cowards, heroes, fights, and half a dozen catchy, hummable tunes. Everything comes from somewhere, Haroon reasoned. So these stories can't simply come out of thin air.
The Center for Fiction Medal for Editorial Excellence honors an editor, publisher, or literary agent for distinguished achievement in fiction. It gives the literary world a chance to celebrate the critical role of publishing professionals. This is the 18th year of the award, and tonight we are delighted that Britt Bennett could join us to present it. Britt Bennett's debut novel, The Mothers, was a New York Times bestseller, but it was her second novel, the absolutely spectacular The Vanishing Half, that was a #1 New York Times bestseller. On its way to becoming a global publishing phenomenon, all of which has certified her as a preeminent writer of our time. Here to present the 2022 Medal for Editorial Excellence, please join me in welcoming Britt Bennett.
Hello, thank you. Thank you for that amazing introduction. Thank you, everyone. It's an honor to present Sarah McGrath with the Center for Fiction's Medal for Excellence in Editing. The first time I ever spoke to Sarah, I'd just sent my debut novel out on submission. I'd spoken to a few interested editors so far, and each was focused on discussing the promises and pitfalls of the book. Was I open to tweaking this character's arc? What did I think about changing the ending, the title? But then Sarah asked me a question that no editor had asked me all day. Who do you want to be? Who do you want to be as a writer? I'd never been asked this question before, nor had I even asked myself. I was finishing an MFA at the time, and all of my writing concerns were granular: structure, theme, plot. But on that phone call, I had the immediate sense that Sarah was an editor who saw far beyond a single book, that she was already looking ahead into a career that I could not yet imagine. Eventually, I would learn all of Sarah's accomplishments as an editor. She's shepherded books that have lived on the bestsellers list, books that have been adapted into films and TV series, books that have won Pulitzer Prizes and National Book Awards. But Sarah's gift as an editor stretches far beyond her storied track record. Over the past 7 years, I've worked with Sarah on multiple books, and each time I'm grateful for her contagious passion and incisive feedback. She's challenged me, pushing me to rework a passage occasionally past the point of my own exhaustion. Before I published a novel, I thought that this was the mark of a good editor, a person who helps you see the flaws in your work more clearly. But perhaps more importantly, Sarah has encouraged me to see the potential in my ideas in the moments when I begin to lose faith. In those difficult times, I've realized how special it is to have an editor like Sarah who sees who you are and also who you could be. So please join me in congratulating Sarah McGrath, this year's recipient, the Center for Fiction Medal for Excellence in Editing.
Thank you so much. Britt, that was the nicest introduction that I've ever been given. Thank you very much. I want to thank the Center for Fiction for creating this rare award to shine a spotlight on editors. Thank you to my amazing authors. I can't believe how many of you are here tonight, and it just means so much to me. Thank you to my mother and father who are here and who both taught me to think deeply about literature. And to my husband, Edward, with whom I share not just a job description, but an ongoing conversation about books and everything else. And thank you to my Riverhead colleagues. You are the ones who got me up here. I don't just mean nominating me for this award, although yes, thank you to Becky Salatin. I mean that none of the work for which I'm recognized at Riverhead would be the same without the leadership, support, friendship, and vision of Jeff Klosky and Jen Martin and Helen Yentis, or the collaborative and creative energy that my colleagues across all departments bring to work every day. When it's right, there can be a magical alchemy between an editor and an author. But that's no less true of an editor and an imprint, and I've been extremely lucky on both counts. Editorial excellence is one of my favorite kinds of excellence. It's usually invisible. By its nature, the bulk of our work is intimate and out of the spotlight. No one becomes an editor to receive an award or to make a speech or a fortune. We do it because we care about cultivating writers and reading. I love being an editor. I have been an editor my entire adult life, even longer if you count my high school newspaper, the Highland Fling. Thank you, Mom and Dad. Very early on, being an editor meant fixing things, moving and smoothing text, the kind of work where solutions click into place, puzzle solving. To much of the outside world, that's the limit of what being an editor means. Those who have seen it up close know how creative and generative it really is and how totally unpredictable. I love all of it. Well, no, not soliciting blurbs, no one loves that, but everything else. The thing I love the most, though, is the author-editor conversation. I came to publishing because I couldn't imagine a life that didn't involve disappearing into books, but I stayed because of the beautiful, protected island on which we two, author and editor, huddle during the book's formative period and make magic. The best editing requires time, over many months and many conversations with the author, to think about the connections between characters and ideas, metaphors and meaning, and to open yourself to the promise that the book in front of you holds. As much as editors seek the rush of discovering a writer or a story we want to share with the world, I've been doing this long enough to know that the most meaningful thrill really comes from the deep relationship with a writer, where the shared understanding isn't just what the author aims to achieve in a given project, but what they want to accomplish over the course of their entire career, where after so much hard work, a manuscript comes in and it's not just better than either of us ever hoped to imagine, it's career-changing. I will never forget what it felt like to read the final version of Meg Wollitzer's The Interestings, or Britt Bennett's The Vanishing Half, or Emma Straub's All Adults Here, to encounter Fates and Furies, or The Friend, or Red at the Bone, or Trust, and to know in each case that the author's life was about to change. Editorial value can be measured in number of bestsellers, book prizes, copies sold, but my own metric is a more intimate one. The number of years and titles shared, the number of conversations, lunches, letters, the number of drafts that we've so closely and quietly sifted through. What makes it even more precious is that it's a private measurement. Only the author and editor need to know what took place. Maybe a lot, maybe a little. Whether the editor's role was to guide the author through multiple arduous rewrites, or simply to do no harm to something perfectly formed and brilliant and done. Editors work in service of writers and books. I said at the start, it's invisible work, and that wasn't a lament. I'm glad for it. It ought to be so, that's the point. We all know that reading fiction makes us more empathetic, helps us understand how other people live and think. That means that what we're doing, shepherding new voices and stories and perspectives to the largest audience possible, is high-stakes work. We get to sit at our desks and do this incredibly meaningful thing. It's just the best job. I know how lucky I am to work with the writers that I do, who allow me to sit beside their greatness every day. I'm thankful to each of them for trusting me with their exceptional work. I may not love being in front of an audience, but I do love reaching an audience. I'm thrilled to receive this award. Thank you so much for this wonderful honor.
I'm here to sing of Ken Chenault, our honorary benefit chair, who has overwhelmed us with his generosity. Now, upon Ken Chenault's retirement from American Express in 2018, Warren Buffett, the company's largest shareholder at the time, stated, "Ken's been the gold standard for corporate leadership and the benchmark that I measure others against." Chenault's leadership prowess had been certified by Fortune magazine when it named him one of the world's 50 greatest leaders in its inaugural list of 2014. Chenault is now chairman and the managing director of the venture capital firm General Catalyst. And as managing director of the firm, he focuses on investing in fast-growing companies that have the potential to become large, fundamental institutions. Yet the focus exclusively on Chenault's achievements in the business world runs the risk of categorizing him as a one-dimensional man. I cannot believe I just appropriated a Marxist philosopher's title, Herbert Marcuse, but there you have it. The focus exclusively on his business prowess is to give short shrift to his many social and civic engagements. Recently, for instance, he and former Merck CEO Ken Frazier galvanized the CEOs of hundreds of major American companies to fight against restrictive voting laws. Chenault is a co-founder of 110, whose mission is to hire, promote, and advance 1 million Black individuals who do not have a four-year degree into family-sustaining careers over the next 10 years. Ken serves on the boards of such intensely socially relevant institutions as the Harvard Corporation and Facebook, the Smithsonian Institution's Advisory Council for the National Museum of African American History and Culture, the Council on Foreign Relations, the National September 11 Memorial and Museum. That's just a little taste. I'm just giving you a little taste so that you can fully appreciate the range of this man, his multifariousness. In short, talk about a life well lived. Ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome to the stage Ken Chenault.
Good evening. Thank you, Earl, for those very kind words. Literature is a luxury. Fiction is a necessity, according to G.K. Chesterton. 60 years ago, as a so-called young adult reader, I had no idea what the impact would be of the distinctive fact of fiction and I'll talk about the fact and fiction. All I knew was that once I found myself in an unexpected grip of the indescribable power, the incredible power of storytelling. It began to inform my budding moral imagination. In America of the turbulent 1960s, or the struggle for racial equality, voting rights, female empowerment, and the end of Western colonialism, my family, my parents, my two brothers, and my sister lived in Hempstead, New York, a working-class town, just a train ride from the glittering towers and bright lights of Manhattan. I shared an attic bedroom with my younger by only about a year brother Stephen. This was our hideaway, where we'd escape to do our homework, or at least Stephen would. He was always the more diligent student. I'd usually find a reason to procrastinate. It would be years before I'd find the discipline that would provide a solid underpinning for my college and law school days, as well as all that would follow. Each night, before it got too late, our mother would appear and always affectionate, never cross, say, lights out, boys. Dutifully, we'd both settle into our narrow beds on opposite corners of the long room. Mine was on the far right side under an eave. On the wall above were posters I had taped as homage to my childhood heroes, Jim Brown, Oscar Robertson, Bill Russell, all transcendent athletes and fiercely proud black men. As soon as my mother closed the door behind her in the half-darkness, my bed lit by the muted, shade-covered glow from the lamp on my nightstand, I would eagerly grab the same book as I had night after night from underneath my scratchy blanket. The Children of Odin, which one of my teachers had given me. The Children of Odin, the book of Northern myths, first published in 1920 and still in print, by the way, is a collection of 15 tales inspired by Norse mythology, written by the Irish poet, novelist, dramatist, and collector of folklore, Patrick Cullum. I grew obsessed with this book. I had never read anything like it. Here was magical time before time as we know it began, when the universe was awash with powers and wonders beyond our imagining, when gods and goddesses roamed the city of Asgard, when always mischievous Loki found ways to infuriate the other gods, when Thor defended Asgard with his mighty hammer, when All-Father Odin crossed the Rainbow Bridge to walk among and commune with men in Midgard, when dragons and giants were commonplace. This cosmos of heroes, Odin the wise and righteous, Baldur the just, Tyr the brave, Thor the mighty, made my heart leap. Yet despite the thrilling complexities and intricacies of the tale's adventures, hard-fought battles leading to victory or defeat, I grasped, even in my tender years, that there was something bleak, even despairing, about the Norse sagas. Bad things kept happening. Worse, Ragnarok, a cataclysmic battle, was predestined. All gods and mortals would die in it. The end of all was inevitable, but just as inevitable was the promise of a new beginning. The universe would be created anew. As I ponder my nighttime childhood readings from the vantage of a man in his early 70s, whose life has taken him to places my earlier self could never have imagined. I realized that even then, when reading fantasy, I was beginning to appreciate and hone skills and values that would stand me in good stead later on. Moral outrage at injustice, an openness to innovation, disavowal of the absolute truth of any abstraction, and appreciation of the value of interpretation. The willingness to accept complexity and uncertainty in crafting solutions while refusing to yield to despair. And above all, the promotion of empathy to enlarge our understanding of and respect for one another. I conclude with a modest proposal. In these corrosive times, might it avail us to apply to the real world these very values and principles which we so take for granted in our reading of fiction. Thank you.
Please give it up again for Marta Sánchez.
Thank you, Marta. Go for broke. Always try and do too much. Dispense with the safety nets. Take a deep breath before you begin talking. Aim for the stars. Keep grinning. Be ruthless. Argue with the world. And never forget that writing is as close as we get to keeping a hold on the 1,001 things: childhood, certainties, cities, doubts, dreams, instants, phrases, parents, loves that go on slipping like sand through our fingers. Salman Rushdie. My name is Colin McCann, and along with Bill Buford, we've been reading pieces from Salman Rushdie's work tonight because, well, there's so many reasons to celebrate him and his work and the work that he champions and has championed for a long time. I got a chance to text with Salman this morning, and he wanted to thank each and every one of you for being here, and he wanted to wish good luck to all of the younger writers who are coming through. And he asked me to read from two pieces, his memoir, Joseph Anton, and then, believe it or not, his brand new novel that is due out very soon. I'm going to read two short pieces. This is for Salman Rushdie. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. That was what literature knew, had always known. Literature tried to open the universe, to increase, even if only slightly, the sum total of what it was possible for human beings to perceive, understand, and so finally to be. Great literature went to the edges of the known and pushed against the boundaries of language, form, and possibility to make the world feel larger, wider than ever before. Yet, this was an age in which men and women were being pushed toward ever narrower definitions of themselves, encouraged to call themselves just one thing: Serb or Croat or Israeli or Palestinian or Hindu or Muslim or Christian or Baha'i or Jew. And the narrower their identities became, the greater was the likelihood of conflict between them. Literature's view of human nature encouraged understanding, sympathy, and identification with people not like oneself. But the world was pushing everyone in the opposite direction, toward narrowness, bigotry, tribalism, cultism, and war. There were plenty of people who didn't want the universe opened, who would, in fact, prefer for it to be shut down quite a bit. And so, when the artists went to the frontier and pushed, they often found powerful forces pushing them back. And yet, they did what they had to do, even at the price of their own ease and sometimes of their lives. From Victory City. I, Pampa Campana, am the author of this book. I have lived to see an empire rise and fall. How are they remembered now, these kings, these queens? They exist now only in words. While they lived, they were victors or vanquished or both. Now they are neither. Words are the only victors. What they did or thought or felt no longer exists. Only these words describing these things remain. They will be remembered in the way I have chosen to remember them. Their deeds will only be known in the way they have been set down, and they will mean what I wish them to mean. I myself am nothing now. All that remains is a city of words. Words are the only victors. Salman Rushdie.
The Center for Fiction's First Novel Prize recognizes the year's best debut novel as selected by a committee of distinguished American writers. The prize brings a $15,000 cash award, and each of the other six finalists receives $1,000. This year's judges were Matt Bell, Nicole Dennis-Ben, Miga Majumdar, Chigozie Obioma, and Rebecca Mackay, who will present the prize. Rebecca Mackay's last novel, The Great Believers, was a finalist for both the Pulitzer Prize and the National Book Award. It won the ALA Carnegie Medal, the Stonewall Book Award, and the Clark Prize, and the LA Times Book Prize, in addition to being chosen as one of the New York Times' 10 best books of 2018. Her other works include The Borrower and The 100-Year House, and the collection of stories, Music for Wartime. Her forthcoming novel, I Have Some Questions for You, will be published in February 2023, and having read it, I can tell you that it is a riveting murder mystery. To present the 2022 First Novel Prize, please welcome Rebecca Mackay.
Hello. Quick shout out to everyone else freaking out about being in the same room as Wole Soyinka. As you can tell from what Jenny said and from your programs, I am not Kirsten Valdez-Quaid, who was last year's winner, but as one of the judges from this year, I'm delighted to present this year's award. Being a judge for a book prize means not only an incredible crash course in the breadth and depth of contemporary literature, but also an immense sudden gratitude to be part of the community we're in and a part of welcoming, in this case, incredible new authors into the world. We are tremendously richer for having read the 25 long-listed nominees presented to the judging panel by the Center for Fiction and the 10 shortlisted authors that we're honoring tonight. I'm first going to remind you of, and hopefully we can hold our applause and then honor at the end of this list, the 10 finalists for tonight's award. First, we have the brilliant and important Brown Girls by Daphne Palasi Andreades. We have the brilliant and important School for Good Mothers by Jasmine Chan. We have the brilliant and important NSFW by Isabel Kaplan. The brilliant and important If an Egyptian Cannot Speak English by Noor Naga. The brilliant and important Little Rabbit by Alyssa Songtsiride. The brilliant and important Big Girl by Mecca Jamila Sullivan. And the brilliant and important The Immortal King Rao by Wahini Farah. With the acknowledgement that we loved all 10 of these books, and we hope you read all 10 of them and benefit from them as much as we did. The winner of the 2022 First Novel Prize from the Center for Fiction is Noor Naga, If an Egyptian Cannot Speak English, from Grey Wolf Press.
Okay, all right. I'm going to try to keep standing and remember all the people I would like to thank tonight, beginning with my parents who are here. They flew all the way from Dubai. It's a 9-hour time difference. Yes. Yes. Yeah. They've been up working since 3 a.m. to be able to be here and managing all these different time zones. And I'm really grateful for their support. I'd also like to thank my editor, Annie, who's here somewhere, and Fiona, who is not, and everybody at Grey Wolf for taking a chance on this book. They were my dream publisher for years, and I waited for them, and I did have other options, and I waited and tried my best to find a way to be able to work with them, because I really believed in finding a publisher that would a publisher and also an editing team that would support the experiment that was this book. It was such a risky book, and I knew that I needed to work with someone who wouldn't straitjacket it, who would be a sounding board for me, to be able to give me a sense of whether or not the risks I was taking were working. And I'm really, really grateful to have found that at Grey Wolf, so thank you. I'd also like to thank the Center for Fiction and the judges and everybody on staff there that makes this award possible. It's really an incredible honor. And I'd like to thank all of you. It's really very moving to be here, to such an extent that I've really lost my language, and this is what I do for a living. So, thank you very much.
Now, to preface our presentation of the 2022 Lifetime of Excellence in Fiction Award to Wole Soyinka, we are thrilled to be able to show an excerpt from Death and the King's Horsemen, recently performed at the Canadian Stratford Festival this past season.
Karaole Babao. On behalf of the cast and the creative team of Death and the King's Horsemen at the Stratford Festival, we would like to thank you for your enormous contributions to literature and theater. Your work has been groundbreaking and will continue to do so for generations to come.
Congratulations, Professor Soyinka!
Ìbànújẹ́ kò ní jẹ́ tiẹ̀, you rock.
Ìbànújẹ́ kò ní jẹ́ tiẹ̀ o.
Ẹ láti ṣe ìgbéyàwó.
Ara rẹ̀ ló fi ṣe.
Hello, I'm Anthony Cimolino, Artistic Director of the Stratford Festival here in Canada. And I know I speak for all of my colleagues and my fellow artists when I say how overjoyed we are to see this honor bestowed on the great Wole Soyinka. It was here in our new Tom Patterson Theatre where this past season we presented Death and the King's Horsemen, revealing itself as both timeless and more timely than ever. That vibrant and powerful 20th century masterpiece left our audiences dazzled. And we were doubly blessed this summer. Theatre specializing in classics don't always get to meet their playwrights in person, so it was a singular honor for us to receive a visit from Professor Soyinka himself. For the artists in our company with whom he spoke in private, for the patrons who attended his appearance as a star guest of our Mian Forum series, that visit was nothing short of inspirational. I can't begin to express how much it meant to us to engage so closely, on stage and off, with one of the most eminent playwrights and one of the most resolutely heroic spirits of our time. Professor Soyinka, we applaud your brilliance, your courage, your tremendous achievements in literature and in life. From all of us here at the Stratford Festival, our very warmest congratulations.
What? Has no one told you yet?
Tell us, Baba.
I go to seek my friend and master company. Who says the mouth does not believe in? No, I have chewed all that before. I say I have. The world is not a constant honeypot. Where I found little, I make do with little. Where there was plenty, I gorged myself. My master's hands and mine have always deep together, and home or sacred feast, the bowl was beaten bronze. The meats so succulent, our teeth accuse us of neglect. We shared the choices of the season's harvest of yams. How my friend would read desire in my eyes before I knew the cause. However rare, however precious, it was mine.
The town, the very land was yours.
The world was mine. Our joint hands raised house toast of trust that withstood the siege of envy and the termites of time. But the twilight hour brings bats and rodents. Shall I yield them cause to foul the rafters?
Are you not that man who looked out of doors that stormy day the god of luck limped by, drenched to the very lice that held his rags together? You took pity upon his sores and wished him fortune. Hey, fortune was footloose this dawn, he replied, till you trapped him in a heartfelt wish that now returns to you. I say you are that man who chanced upon the calabash of honor. You thought it was palm wine and drained its contents to the final drop.
Life has an end. A life that will outlive fame and friendship begs another name. What elder takes his tongue to his plate, licks it clean of every crumb? He will encounter silence when he calls on children to fulfill the smallest errand. Life is honor. It ends when honor ends.
This moment calls for the presence of Professor Henry Louis Gates, Jr. By now, it should be apparent to many in the room that I'm not Henry Louis Gates, Jr. and that Henry Louis Gates, Jr. is not in the building. He sustained an injury to his back yesterday, no doubt while jumping up and down, dancing and prancing during Brazil's ruthless evisceration of South Korea in World Cup competition. In a missive to the distinguished Harvard professor, our honoree tonight encouraged him to stay home with the line, back no good, sorry Errol, feet no go. But as we all of us know, there's no business like show business. So, quote one of my heroes, George Clinton, let's turn this mother out. It's a fool's errand to attempt to introduce Wole Soyinka, briefly to limn his heroic life or his magisterial literary achievements at 89. Suffice it to say that in the global economy of literary prestige, Nobel laureate that he is, he stands as a colossus for his plays, novels, poetry, and essays, but inextricable from his literary enterprise is his career as a political activist, an implacable defender of human rights and freedom, whose courage, time and again, has threatened his life. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Wole Soyinka. Wally. How would you account for the vocation of the writer today and have your views changed? Must art necessarily have social utility? Or is there such a thing, as I've heard, as of art for art's sake?
Talk about how should art have a citizen. I missed a part of that. So Machako, could you repeat? Because I want to make sure that you take the correct message back to Skip.
How would you describe, this is one of Skip's questions, by the way. What is the vocation of the writer today, and have your views changed? Must art necessarily have social utility, or is there such a thing as art for art's sake?
I was afraid that was a question. Yes, it's a perennial issue, one of concern. But my position has remained the same all my life, that one doesn't have to impose any responsibility on art, because the very nature of art being a reflection on reality, on phenomena, already constitutes a service to society, to humanity. It's unavoidable. It's usually the fascists of society, under whatever ideology, who insist, who want to compel the writer to interpose within their own writing the ideologies of others. So for me, it's never been an issue. The very process of creativity, of reflection, is in itself a noteworthy and valid contribution to the human seizure of our existence. So it's never been a question for me, really, that I want to answer.
How would you describe the relationship between what inspires you to write and what inspires you to activism?
What inspired?
What inspires you to write and what inspires you to activism?
Ah, that one, again. Well, sometimes it depends what I've eaten lately or drank. And sometimes, therefore, take refuge in saying, maybe it was something that I ate or drank when nobody's watching. The first part of that question is not a problem at all. I've been sitting with a musician this evening, and I never suspected for a moment that she was a musician. But the moment she started playing, I knew that she was a musician. And she must have discovered that along the way. What inspired her to be a musician? I'm sure she cannot answer it. Yeah. But I made a confession to her that actually I was pulled towards music at one time, but fortunately for me, listening one day to a remarkable expositor of that discipline, music, I went home. I was going to study the classical guitar. So after listening to Julian Bream, I went home, took my guitar, put it in a box, locked it, and put it under my bed. I knew that day I was not meant to be a musician. And so people discover this along the way. And I find it an impossible question yet again to answer. How does one know one is not supposed to be that? And on the contrary, to be that. I cannot answer that question.
Now, I'm 2 for 2, so I'll go for 3 for 3. Democracy is at risk worldwide, we are told. What is the state of democracy throughout Africa and in Nigeria in particular?
Sorry, we're hearing it, and there's a huge echo here, which distorts, you know, so you have to be very careful.
Democracy is at risk worldwide, we are told. What is the state of democracy throughout Africa and in Nigeria in particular?
Dismal. I have to be very candid there. We have had periods when it looked as if democracy was inevitable. And again, I like to emphasize the fact that democracy is not a Western concept. We've had many traditional systems of governance on the African continent, sometimes even going under monarchism, but no different from, shall we say, British monarchism. In other words, democracy under a symbolic monarchy. So we've had that experience. And it's only after the distortion of the traditional systems of governance with the checks and balances, the ethos of participation, of accountability, of voice, of volition, distorted by the European colonial powers, that we then had to start struggling to convince ourselves that we did already practice certain democratic structures of governance. And so it's been a question of trying to retrieve under, shall we say, Western coloration, certain democratic principles, certain issues, certain principles which are already embedded in what we call democracy, whether it's parliamentary democracy, US presidential democracy, French mock presidential and prime ministerial. It's all a question of participation and accountability. And right now, it's been a few steps forwards and several steps backwards. You know yourself, there's been a rash of military takeover in many countries, which before were already embarked on the good vessel democracy all over the place. But they've been suspended by the African Union simply because they've violated undertakings along the democratic lines. So we have backwards and forwards, but right now, the issue, in fact, for us, is not so much democracy. Everybody accepts that that is the goal, but the pretend democracy in which certain sectors of the society are privileged and therefore completely vitiate the whole notion of egalitarianism, which is the bedrock of democracy, like religion, like the quasi-governments, the fundamentalists. I'm so happy, and I would have been surprised if Salman Rushdie had not featured in this gathering. And so we have a competition of authority and power, and we have fundamentalists dictating the pace, even being bold enough as to say that democracy is against the will of Allah, and that all practitioners of democracy are hypocrites. Who are the real hypocrites? Those fundamentalists who really competing for power in the democratic situation and imposing their own authority through violence. So the question, and that's the third difficult question you asked this evening, the question of democracy, was the state of democracy in Africa, is a very confused one. And on the whole, I'm afraid, rather negative.
Nowhere in the world is there more Western venture capital at work than in Africa today. And nowhere else are the Chinese investing more in the building of infrastructure. Are we at the dawn of a new imperialism?
The Chinese, yes, this comes up again and again. But the issue is this. If you say you're practicing a capitalist, you're sort of putting into effect a capitalist ideology, then you must play by the rules, which is one of supply and demand negotiation. If you say running, socially running along a socialist ethos. Of course, then the rules, those are very basic, but also open to debate. So we have a situation where the Western powers have had a free run for decades, even centuries. And along comes a new power, which plays again along the capitalist rules and says to the developing countries, we're making an offer you cannot refuse. You see, I've been watching The Godfather lately. And they negotiate in good faith. I'm now stating the case of governments. They negotiate in good faith. They say we'll build from here to there a structure or a railroad or a road which took your former capitalist bosses years. And we can negotiate payment, and we'll make sure that services provided afterwards, it won't be a kind of let's say, fair affair, and they're keeping to the rules. What do you expect African governments to do? I was in Abu Dhabi recently, and I watched this capitalist society, even though it says it's a theocratic society, but basically the ethos, the ideology is capitalism. And you see something growing up literally out of nothing. Even the roads there, they don't have potholes, and they're supposed to be a developed society. It's not corrugated like Manhattan roads. And so when playboys of the African world come and they see Abu Dhabi, they look and say, wait a minute, we want something like this. Who can do it for us at the same pace? Can you blame them for accepting the partnership, and that's the critical word, of the Chinese government? It's up to them to decide. However, at the same time, let me state that I acknowledge the fact that, especially up to about 10 years ago, the Chinese didn't care what kind of government they went to bed with. And of course, it was an opera. We said to them, for instance, you cannot say you are helping Africa because you're making structures, you're building roads, and at the same time, you're supporting a repressive, sometimes even genocidal government. And the Chinese government took note and began to withdraw a little bit from those reprobates of African society, and began to deal more with the democratic parts and postures, at least, of certain African governments. So for both sides, it's a learning, ongoing process. I'm not making a case for abandoning this or something. I'm just saying that I think the Western powers should stop being hypocritical about Chinese presence on the African continent. The Chinese came, they abandoned quote-unquote communist ideology. They built up their capital resources, and then they went out and said, we're challenging the rest of the world. Can't blame them. So it's competition. I'm not a capitalist by instinct, but I accept the powers of capitalism. And if we have to deal with a capitalist issue, and we can tame our partners, I think we should try and be just and balanced about the Chinese influence on the African continent.
Here's another question, remarkable for its inevitability. How does the American landscape, the American political landscape, appear to you nowadays?
The American landscape, did you say?
Political landscape.
Political landscape.
How does it appear to you nowadays? How do you explain the Donald Trump phenomenon?
Thank goodness I don't feel isolated in my situation, because just this afternoon, I think, turned on CNN and is watching the testimony of one of the police officers in, on the January 6th event, which for me is a remarkable occasion. And he said, quote him as accurately as I can, and he said very bluntly, he didn't skirt around the issue. He said something which many of us outside have been saying and wondering about. He said, Donald Trump waged war against the United States. He said, and I'm not saying this metaphorically. I'm saying, I'm quoting this man, say, he declared war against American society, against world democracy, he said, and I mean this in physical terms. And outside, this is what we have been reading. And when you talk about democracy, here's somebody who's playing games with the American people, millions and millions of people, playing games with the democratic structures and laughing into the back of his hand and looking down at a people of, how many millions are you these days? And saying, look at these mumus, that's a Nigerian expression. And I'm just toying around with them, and they're all, thinking that they really have an issue on their hands. And we just fail to understand how it is, first of all, how it could have happened. Next, this happened, this challenge to democracy, your first question, is being treated like some kind of Boy Scout infraction. And Donald Trump is gearing up to be your president again, and you don't understand what that means for us, where we're contesting political bullies and monsters all the time, whether of the theocratic or the secular kind. And you're just playing footsie with this character. And I've heard it said that not only might he win the Republican nomination, Party Democrat, but they might actually become your next president. Well, you know what I did the first time he was elected? Yes, I'm going that route again. The moment it looks as if he's coming back. So when we talk about democracy and we talk about people's seizure of this ideology, because it is an ideology, in their lives, and we see after so many years, this ridiculous game going on, we just wonder really, who's the flag bearer these days for democracy? Is it the United States, or is it perhaps China? It's a question which I think is about time. It is very closely examined. Let me remind you also, and I think it's important for us always to go back from time to time. I think we recognize this, but we don't do it deeply enough. The drive into White House by the Trump administration was preceded by some of the most racist manifestation of the security forces in this nation. I've said this before. The killings, extrajudicial killings of blacks by the police, all owing to the rhetoric of Donald Trump in his campaigns, unquestionably. I mean, it escalated to a level where everybody could have seen what was going on, what would happen eventually. And so racism, marginalization, just chauvinistic talk, shithole countries expression, remember? It wasn't manufactured. This was a president who actually referred to a number of African and Asian countries as shithole countries, and who actually went on and said, we need more Aryans being brought in. Get me some of those white-haired or blonde Scandinavian countries. And you see, you're practicing democracy, and that fellow is getting ready to come back again. The landscape is very bleak for democracy in the United States.
Thank you so very much, Wally, for gracing the Center for Fiction by accepting its Lifetime of Excellence in Fiction Award. Thank you for the elegance of your mien and for your good cheer.
Thank you all. We're nearing the end of our evening, and in conclusion, Errol and I both want to offer a toast to all of our honorees for sharing their immense gifts with us. And to the Center for Fiction for giving us all an occasion to acknowledge and celebrate those gifts. Thank you all so much.
Good night. Godspeed. Take care of yourselves.